Yeah, Une, tell us about how do you keep your heart soft? When you've been a Christian for many years and you've walked through lots of different challenges and trials and probably no doubt had lots of encouragements but also lots of discouragements. How do you keep your heart soft throughout it all and responsive to the Holy Spirit?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, actually. When, in this time and also in the past, not, life can be hard, hey? And life can be different than you think it should go. But actually, to keep your heart soft is really trusting God, but also being in contact with Jesus and just sharing your heart and sharing your frustration. And so the Holy Spirit comes to you and helping you in this situation. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. And Henk, how about you? How have the last 6 months been?
Yeah, that's been I think I've been pleasantly surprised with the resilience of the church. To be honest, we work with different churches, and some of the churches who didn't do so well before COVID are doing better during COVID. Other churches are helping other churches to do better, and I love that kind of. It's great to see also young guys and so there's a thankfulness in all of this, and there's also a bit like when I've been struck by lately by and feels it's very personal, but John 2 about the wedding in Cana, where Jesus performed his first miracle, and I think what happened there is that the wine ran out. It says, and the question that comes: didn't they prepare well? What happened? Have they either miscalculated stuff, or has it come as a surprise? Have more people turned up than they expected? But they couldn't handle the whole thing, and it feels like we've done stuff, and we've been surprised by what's happened. And we're now finding that we have no solution. And what Jesus did, and what he said to the servants, he said, fill these jars with water to the brim. And they did. And I think that's what I felt, that I, over this time, need to fill the jar, to be sure that I fill the jar with worship. And I'm not relying on, I fill the jar with prayer and with my walk with God. And, that's been a bit of I haven't found that easy, to be honest. To sit around all day at home, not meeting other people. I'm the kind of guy that love to be with people, and somebody can't. So it's a bit, that frustration has hit me, and I had to work my way through it. But I think the thing that God spoke to me is keep your jar full, because there's a thing you can't do that Jesus can do when he is with you. Mm-hmm. He can change things around, and he can change water into wine. He can do things that we can't. So be diligent and also be purposeful. So I felt that's something that I need to still learn and enjoy it too.
So I mean, you guys are two people that I've kind of admired and known from afar. And what I have always thought and observed is that you're two people who seem to just radiate joy, and a joy in God, a love for people. Is that natural? Is that something you've always just been very, joyful, happy people? Or is it something that God's really done in your life? And how have you managed to maintain wells of joy and optimism when things have been that difficult?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it's how God has made me, but I do feel it's part of me too. I do see light, even if I'm in a tunnel. I see the end of it. That kind of thing. I've had that. God had planted it in me. I think over time, it has grown stronger. It isn't that I'm always joyful. I found that We spoke in Liverpool about some of the challenging stuff that put us in a prison like we felt at times in prison like a Joseph. And that's not a pleasant thing, and you wrestle through it. So, but I think generally we are able to help one another to keep the joy alive. So if I'm not that strong at the moment, then they will be. It's almost like it works that way. Huh?
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, for me, it's, I remember when I became, when Jesus met me on a very young age, when I was 12 years, I felt such a love, from Jesus. And when I talk about it, I still feel that most of the time. And that makes me really joyful. And I think also in praying, being with Jesus and praying for things and just being yourself with him and actually knowing that he answered questions, that is really filled building, isn't it? And that gives you joy as well. So, and in those times when it was hard, you remember what he did in the past through prayer, or you know what I mean? And I think also for us, I think for us together, we help each other, like Hank said.
Yeah.
Yeah, in just, keeping joyful. I think
Yeah.
that it's a choice too, isn't it? You can choose it too, isn't it? You can choose it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what strikes me about you two is just a deep authenticity about your life in God. And how have you managed? So in Liverpool, you talked a lot about parenting and life on mission as a family and as a married couple. Is it something that you intentionally try to cultivate a culture of joy and thankfulness in your home? And how have you? Yeah, what are some of the key things that are valuable to you in the Christian life? How have you sought to try to impart them to your children as they were growing up?
Well, it's for when they were very small, you teach them kind of way like to be grateful for everyday life, for what we have, and I think also, yeah, songs. I think music in the house does a lot, doesn't it? And
Yeah, I think what you say is that we have found it very important to have joy in the house. If you would meet our kids at the moment, you'll think they're very loud. Got a very loud family, uh, but they seem to enjoy life too. And I think that's something that we have found very precious. Um, I think when it says we found that even through the most difficult parts, when we look back, I think the difficult parts have helped us more than we could ever imagine. Even our kids, I think. I've said before, I think it's amazing even in nature that the fruitfulness is not on the mountain. The fruitfulness is in the valleys. And on the mountains, hardly anything grows. And I'm a mountaintop guy. I love the mountain. I love the high moments in God. But it's not necessarily the most fruitful times when success is there. We found that looking back, the difficult moments have brought out stuff. Someone said the other day, I think last week in preaching, that diamonds are made under pressure. But I also think fruitfulness is more likely to happen when we're in the valley, when we can't see stuff happen, then God is most present. So I think that's where the joy comes from. It's not always in the situation, but looking to God in that situation. I'm not sure if that's clear, but.
No, that's beautiful. Really helpful. I love that comment about valleys and fruitfulness. Thank you. Guys, for those who don't necessarily know you and know your setup, give us a kind of thumbnail sketch of some of the things that you've walked through as a family. How many children do you have? Where have you lived in your lives? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, so Henk and I met a very young age. We met, Henk was 18 and I was 14. And so,
42 years of marriage now.
Wow.
42 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. And we have got 4 children. So they live in different parts of Holland. They all married and they have children. So we've got 9 grandchildren. And so we moved quite a bit, actually, didn't we? Yeah.
Where have you lived then? You said in and out of Holland. You've been planting churches in and out of Holland, supporting church planters. Have you done that for a long time? Has that been the majority of your life spent planting churches, supporting church planters, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's grown that way. I think we had, I was 18, nearly 14, but we had really known from the beginning a call of God on our lives. So I think that's helped us. You know, when we were talking about parenting, about being on a mission together, it does help if that happens right at the beginning. And we were fortunate. We were thanking God that we had that same kind of uh, direction and vision for our lives. That has helped us, it helped our kids. We've always felt that not just us as a team, but our kids are part of the team. So we used to pray together as a family for the next step. So our kids from a very young age were praying for finance, for God to move. So we had them involved. And that's, yeah, and some people are not that fortunate because they meet either God in another stage in their lives or their kids in another phase or season. But yeah, I think that's been part of it.
Yeah. And most of the time it was by invitation.
Yeah,
So it was not like we had to, because sometimes we didn't want to so much. But by invitation,
yeah,
it, our journey went actually.
yeah. It's even so that there was so much pressure on one particular time in our lives that we had no church, we had no income, we had no nothing. And I basically, at that moment, it wasn't good. I had not a good attitude, but I was fed up with leadership. I didn't want to be in leadership anymore. And I really struggled with church. So Renee had more faith than I had at that time, but God took me really through that mold of seeing Him still calling us. And He did that in a precious way. And it went from, my attitude wasn't a good one, but God used it to show me that He still calls. And I found this, that if something is an ambition in your life, you can lay it down. But if it's a calling of God, you can't lay it down because God will call you. So I think if it's a calling, it'll come back. And if it comes back, you need to respond,
Yeah.
whatever. And I think it's by the grace of God, really.
Yeah, and we took our children with us, but we informed them, we shared with them, we prayed together, and not too much. You don't want to put much pressure on children, but inform them and, pray about things. And when God called us to another place, we shared and we helped them to connect with other people. And I think also having leaders in the house, we had quite a few leaders from outside coming and stay with us when they were preaching in the church. So our children were involved in that too. So getting the mission in the house. And, they heard stories and, they were involved and and we had fun, it was a combination. So
Yeah.
really, that is how we.
How many times have you moved in your life?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we don't see. I think my counting is more than Renee's counting, probably.
Yeah.
Moving house has been moving place. We've done more, but completely moving our whole house we've done 7, 8 times.
Yeah.
But moving for sometimes we moved for half a year, but kept our house, and I still feel that's a moving. But Renee was not agree with that. But it's So yeah, quite a bit, different parts. The last time was 5 years ago, and we have sometimes we moved because of local situations. Sometimes it was but every time we did feel God pointed us, God showed us.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
4 of those times we were at crossroads. And I mean crossroads, I mean a couple of years without any future planned out, waiting. And if you wait with 4 kids in the room, it's a different kind of waiting. If it's just the 2 of us, which lately happened a couple of years ago, we had 2 years of undefined future. It's different again. So sometimes, it's coming to a place of depending on God and trusting for finance. That been 4 times in our lives we had no income, not at all. I had to trust God for every penny, and so. But He's always been faithful. We've never had short. We've always had enough. So He's been faithful right through everything.
Yeah.
There's lots of places I'd love to go, lots of questions I'd have. Tell us about some of the challenges and pressures of living without any specific finance. Describe 1 or 2 of perhaps the most memorable moments where it's been hardest, and what it's like to live in that situation, and try to keep your kids from despondency and yourselves from despondency.
Yeah, we had a period in life when we lived in Warrington where the church stopped really, and we had to live actually by faith. And so Hank had to go to, how do you call that?
To claim some money from the government just to hold up our hands for some income for that week. So every week I had to go stand in a line, queue up, and get some, you call it dole or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the funny thing was that, in living that way and very simple way, you get quite creative. Just looking in the cupboard what we have, and also be organized in how much money we can spend in the week. Sometimes a week was a bit more, and the other week was less. But when there was less, I just prayed, and we prayed, didn't we? And actually, we got, it was amazing. Sometimes from people you wouldn't expect, or even we didn't know, because it was just through the letterbox. And but in my heart, I always felt like this is just for a season. It can't be, forever.
We hoped it wasn't for.
No, but I mean, we were selling our house. We couldn't sell our house. It was frustrated sometimes,
Yeah.
But deep in my heart, I knew, that we will get out of this, and God will show again. But actually, you feel the pressure because you don't have much money. It's a different life, isn't it? And I think special in today in the COVID, maybe there are people who are in the same position. But the thing is, there's always hope in God, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we did have, so we involved our kids at times, not always, because like Anne said, you don't want the pressure on them, you want faith built into them. So you choose the moments where you share, but we felt one particular moment when we had nothing and no bread for the next day to share with our kids. They were young. And that was an amazing moment because when we started to pray, we had them all in the kitchen area. So we had this dining area. So we were having our last bit of bread, and we shared with them, well, this is it. We need God to help us. There's nothing else. So, and then, shall we pray together? And we prayed together. And then our oldest girl, Maria, went upstairs. She came downstairs. She'd been saving money for a doll, for playing. But she said, Jesus said to me to give you this money. And we were absolutely ashamed. We didn't want to take it, but God spoke to us. No, you take it, because I spoke. I indeed spoke. And she gave them money. and we spent it on food the next day. And then, what's that?
There was this couple in the church,
Yeah,
and he came up to me and said, Maria, it's a funny thing, really. He said, God spoke to me to give this letter to Maria, and there's some money in there. And so I gave this letter to Maria with the money in there, and she opened it. And actually, it was double in money.
yeah,
So, she was just so blessed and so, encouraged. And that is faith building as well, isn't
Yeah.
it? Especially on a young age.
they saw Jesus move.
Yeah.
Because we prayed together, we involved them. They saw God answer prayer, and
Yeah.
she's never forgotten it.
No.
It made her very generous. Why? Because she was seeing God provide.
Yeah.
Those kind of things, I think.
Well, because I think, like you said, during COVID, most people are, one of the things that most people are so worried about is the thought of losing their jobs, losing their income, and being destitute. What would you say to encourage people who are facing unemployment and are scared of how they're going to make ends meet? What are some of the lessons that you've learned through the various times that you've been through that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very easy to say because we are all different, aren't we? But for me personally and I think for the people, just encourage them to pray about it and trust God, and also not having the focus the whole time on it, but actually just be creative and what you have, just to try to make something about it. And so kind of homely kind of attitude, just to share, and even to share what you have to others. Sometimes it's if you tell others that you are in need, or you just have that, you also can swap kind of things. And but really praying is, and trusting God is what I would encourage. But yeah.
And I do think that I'm just recalling the moments that we had to learn that lesson. We spoke about the Warrington time near Manchester. And when we arrived, we'd never ever had a gift any time. It never happened to us, and probably because we didn't need it. But then came that moment where we had no income, and Bram, our son, was only 8 months old. So we bought from our last few, was it £1.50 or something like that. We walked to the shop to buy milk for him. And so we walked to the shop and said, God, this is it. This is our last money. This is milk for our baby. It's it. We haven't got anything. You called us here, but it's empty. And as we walked back to the house, and we were staying in the house of a single guy, we lived in one of his bedrooms for a while, with all the boxes around. We actually had an envelope in his letterbox with our names on, and we opened. That was our first gift, and so we started to trust God for income. In those days, they said you live off the gospel. Basically, you trust God for your own income. But what God taught us at that time is not only pray for your own money to come in, but we actually prayed to give a tithe away, to give money away. So said to God, for ourselves we need 40 quid, but will you provide 50 quid so we can give 10 quid away? And God's been faithful even in doing that. So we found, I haven't found it easier when I got older. And you would think without kids it would be easier to trust God. It's only the two of you. I find that it's the similar thing happens still now. If we are without, we need to trust God again.
Yeah.
It doesn't get easier. It is still a step of faith. So I would say to everyone, trust the shepherd, trust the Father, trust the provider. He will provide. He can't and doesn't want to do anything else. But it sometimes is at the last moment. It's when you run dry, when there's no more wine, when it's finished. But but expect him to
Yes.
turn up. He will.
Yeah, he will.
Wow. I mean, you referenced the story of the wedding at Cana at the beginning, and just then again that your question at the beginning when I asked you what have you learnt was just wondering, have we not, or of the wedding at Cana in Galilee, did they not prepare for this wedding? Did they not plan? And what I hear you saying is actually you were following the call of God, so you were obeying Jesus as much as you can, but still found yourself without in times. And knowing that actually ultimately it's him that provides, and he calls, so he's going to deliver what he needs. That's the sort of things that I'm hearing. You've obviously, you've had to get used to changing quite a lot, changing location, changing house, a lot of moves that you've mentioned in response to the call of God on your life and planting churches. One of the unexpected tolls that can take on you is just the relational toll. Particularly, you both strike me as people. You love being with people. You build relationships and connections with people, and yet it seems that you've often also had to let go of those relationships in pursuit of a call. How have you managed to remain open-handed and flexible when you've perhaps found friends and you want to stay with friends, you've found a church, you love the church? How have you managed to remain open to moving again? Can you speak into that something?
Yes, good question, Jess. I think we, again, it varied. There is nothing the same, and sometimes we did better, other times we didn't do so well. But I think in general, I'm just recalling that when we bought a house a few times in our lives. Every time we bought a house, we sat down to pray. And we did it once or twice, even with the estate agent, pray together. But we did pray, God, we've got this house, but it's yours. If you want us to move, we'll move. We are yours. So if there is anything in the future, then please let us be open because we want to follow you. So we did feel that we are following a cloud, the pillar of fire, the pillar. That if God finds it's time to move, we need to be ready. So I think we've even said to our kids, even at times it seemed that we either joined our kids for a season or they joined us for a season. We've always said, well, you need to follow Jesus because we might be going. So it's that kind of thing that has been with us that it's not that we don't want to settle, because I think a few years ago, if you would asked me, we lived in another part of Holland 5 years ago. If you had asked me a few years before that, then I would have said, this is where I'm going to die. I'm happy here. I feel fulfilled and okay here. But God had other plans. If you'd ask me now, I'd love to die here. I'm happy here where we live right now. But that, and I do hope we're not going to move shortly. I'd love to be able to talk to you 10 years from now and say, no, we didn't move. Praise God. But if so, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think also I remember the first time we left our place, we thought, I was pregnant with the first one and we moved to England for a year. I remember actually, I found it quite hard. I remember that, leaving family, leaving friends. I struggled with that. But I mean, in the steps to go, we got new friends, and you keep in touch with a few because you can't everybody you
No,
can please
no.
and everything, but you keep in touch with your family and everything. And but with the steps to go further, then you get more flexible and not really detached so much. That has two sides, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to make really friendships because you move quite a bit. But I think we did okay. I think.
Yeah.
I think the first time was hard for us and also for the children. Well,
For
for
our parents as well,
parents.
eh?
Yeah.
For our
Yeah.
parents, it hasn't been easy because we
No.
took the grandchildren away from them when we moved abroad. For them, that was a big step. And I don't know how they did it because they let us go. And, so I think, for particularly for family, we moved away from my parents who are still alive, but poor. The rest of my family and our family is still where we were 5 years ago. We left them to come here, so it isn't that easy at times. So we struggle with that at times a little bit, but no, we do. They see that it. So they've all released us and said it's okay and fine, but it's got its costs, I think.
Were your parents believers?
Uh, well, I think they have found rest in their faith, but I haven't. Um, they've never expressed it in the same way as we do. But I think that's why it's for them. It has been harder for us to say, well, God called us to go. That's quite something. If it comes in
Yeah.
a mindset that is, well, they had to get used to our language and to our moves, but they have, huh?
They have.
And I've come to
Yeah.
appreciate that. So we
Yeah.
have stayed good friends and pray with them at times and for them. But
Yeah, and you find ways just to
yeah,
keep in contact and
Yeah.
to bless them and
yeah,
to
yeah. And
make
I'm
them
grateful
good.
for my brothers and sisters who have surrounded them and are with them. But yeah, so but it does come with a cost at times, and we have to realize that at times it isn't that easy. And I think for those that church plant right now in Europe and beyond and in England, you leaving has its effect that you have to, yeah, it, it works both ways. It's challenging, exciting, adventurous,
Yeah.
but it does come with a cost.
Yes.
Yeah. I would imagine, like every church planter, you've known periods and times of real loneliness as well in your moving. Can you speak into how to handle loneliness and cope with that? And even if you have any memories where you can relate to times of real loneliness?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in church, like in leadership. Actually,
Yeah.
it can be lonely. And I remember when the kids were small, and um, Hank went often away, and in those times it was more the man going, and I stayed with the children. I remember sometimes, I thought, well, the only thing I do is just looking after the children and just being at home. But I remember one time I was putting the children into bed, and I shared it with Jesus. I just shared my heart to him, and I really felt like he was sitting next to me. He said, "But I see you. I see you, what you're doing." And I had a bit of like a pity, how do you call it?
Self-pity party.
Self-pity party kind of thing. But, in actually being, feeling that Jesus was with me, and he, I really felt like he was saying, I see what you're doing. I felt I felt really part of it. So being at home is not, you can still be together on the mission when you're home. You know what I mean? So really actually pouring your heart out to Jesus and just sharing. I mean, that helps, but also knowing from that moment on that, we are part of it.
Yeah.
And just getting on with it as well. And I have had some lonely times. Yeah.
Yeah.
But his presence is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
When his presence comes, it really changed. And
Yeah, and I think it also comes when at times when you don't see much happening. It's not just when you're in a small setting, but sometimes it is the same applies to all of us. When you're in a situation, a bit like a Joseph, you're even surviving being a slave, but then you end up in prison, and then you have a a moment where the guy after a couple of years in prison then finds a glimmer of hope with his cupbearer and baker. And then he said, please don't forget me. And I think, well, he must have thought that this is a way out. And he had a delayed waiting time of another 2 years. And I think those must have been the hardest years in his life, because that seemed to be like, we know the end of the story, but he didn't. And I think sometimes we at the moment don't know the end of the story. So if you're in the middle of it, it isn't that easy. And I found hope and strength from people like a Joseph and others in the Bible who have faced similar stuff. And I think sometimes God brings people in your way, and he did. He's done that. People who just passed by but said simple things like a tap on the nice shoulder saying, "Hi, soldier, you're doing well." And that just mentioning of soldier made her feel, remember, we're in an army and I see you and we'll get through this together. It really did something. And sometimes something like that can change it.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think I love the people of God in our lives who've been faithful themselves and also brought faith at certain moments. So I think in moments of loneliness, turn around to the shoulders around you and the people around you, because they can be a great help.
And thank you for saying that. Actually, the Joseph example of seeing a glimmer of hope and that hope disappearing out the door up to Pharaoh's court and forgetting all about you, because I think in my experience as someone who's planted a site or a church now in a small town in England, is that it's slow and often discouraging, which is okay. But then the challenge is we seem to be surrounded by Christian voices of leaders in other churches saying how wonderful and how much growth they're seeing. And you can spend a lot of your time thinking, am I doing something really wrong? Because that's not my experience. Like, we're trying all the same things, we're turning all the same dials and not seeing the same results. Can you speak into helping church planters and people in leadership, whether it's in business or church, where you feel like you're doing all the right things, or you think you are, but you're not seeing the results that you were promised? How do you keep going and keep finding joy and perseverance without just getting, bitter at God? Like, why are you giving everyone else the growth and everyone else the blessing? Can you speak into that?
Yeah, I started off this time with saying about there's one particular church that is doing so well under COVID. That church wasn't doing, and the leadership wasn't doing that well before COVID. And we meet with church planters, with Chris Taylor and others here in Europe. Once in a while, we'll get together, and I think that the beauty of it is you share. The downside of it, sometimes you share only the good stuff. And so there are people in that room then that hear others say, man, we had 20 in the last week and we had all fires running fantastically and we get people saved. And then there's a church growing, and you hear those stories, and the guys who are silent in the room, well, the guys think, man, nothing is happening in my corner. There's nothing happening. I can't see a move of God. I see animals move. I see anything move, but not the church. And surprisingly, under COVID, we're pretty much the same again. And I think this, surprisingly, COVID brings a kind of unity amongst leaders, because suddenly we can't boast about anything. We have no way of counting the people. And so instead of counting the people on performance, we are coming to a place of the presence of God. And I think I loved what I heard last week of someone saying, well, we might not have a plan, but we've got a person. And I think I love that. I love that over this time. So don't count yourself out. Count yourself completely in, whatever. I think God uses people that are available. Coming back to the story of Cana the wedding, Jesus used servants. The guy of the feast, it says, when they brought the wine to him, he did not know where it was coming from. And it says the servants did, because they'd been with Jesus. And I think all that matters is just be with Jesus. Because what the servants couldn't do, but they could bring it, is what Jesus could do. And the guy who was actually leading it had no idea. So I'd love to be surprised again over the season. But I think my encouragement would be, it's this really. God is there. And we've been in situations that did not grow. And we've been involved with church that were over 400 and led it. There's a thrill in both. And there are challenges with both. So we've known the not so good and what seemed to be better, but yeah.
Une, can you speak into that as well? That same dynamic, really, as a mum with kids, where the temptation is often to look at other families and go, well, their kids are well behaved, or their kids seem to do well at school, and my kids are struggling, or we moving around, and my kids are lonely. My kids are going on with God. My kids aren't. Can you speak into that from a parent's point of view as well, not just in church planting, in leadership, but some of the dynamics you've observed and how you've coped with that?
Yeah, I think it's the comparing is quite something, isn't it? To compare yourself with somebody, and I think we have to get loose of that and just look at your own family. Well, I look to other families, but more like, what can I learn? What can what can we learn from this? I'm in this situation. I would love to learn. So I think to have an open heart and actually to learn. I think still on this age, still to learn. I mean, that's quite an attitude, isn't it? And I think, also to keep trusting God in the spiritual, but also just having the joy in your house is another thing, isn't it? To really to just be joyful with the kids and not comparing yourself with others. Yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Do you have any other advice really on how to take your children on mission, or how to raise your children for a life of faith?
I would say keep it very close to who you are, and work from there. I think it is the starting point might be different for everyone, but I think God uses what is available. And I think our kids will always see what is genuine and true. They might not listen to everything that we say, but they will see everything that we do. And I think if we are genuine, if we are the genuine article as parents, our kids have got the biggest chance to grow in things of God. Because if they, that's why I think I've used that before, but that's why I think Jesus says before he teaches on the Our Father prayer, he says, before you pray publicly, go privately. Lock yourself away. Do it at home. And I think at home, our kids can see us pray. At home, they can see that, because for our kids, for instance, I've not only been their father, but for a long time, even until they got married, I've been their spiritual, I've been the guy in charge in the church in that sense of leading a team. So they've had me on a Sunday and they've had me every other day. So they know if it's okay or not. So I think that to be people of integrity, I think.
Yes.
You give them the biggest hope by who you are.
Yes, I think, and also loving Jesus, in a real way, but also just to be yourself in that too, and not to be, not pressing on them what they have to do, but living your life and give them room. And also in prayer, pray for your children, because in the end, they are not our children, they're his children, and that is quite a relief. And that is what we have to learn. I mean, that's not sometimes straight away, but we have to learn that they are his children. And I think for also to take them to different places, where I remember we took them to Reinhard Bunker, a meeting, just, I'm not saying so much, but just being there in that present kind of thing, and just see, that God heals and, things like that. Sometimes just being out of the box a bit and just, see what God is doing in the world. I mean, I think that is very faith building, because sometimes we can be quite focused on our church. I think that's a wonderful thing about New Ground, New Frontiers. We're part of the bigger picture,
Yeah.
and to show that to your children, in a natural way, and talk about people who are going through a rough time, pray for them, or just seeing hear things what is really faith building. That helps as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And
How do you help your children process their own doubts and disappointments in faith without, as a parent, freaking out and overreacting, but not underreacting either?
No. Again, it depends. Sometimes our kids are all different. We've got 4 kids, but they're very different from one another. And what would work for one would not work absolutely for the other one. So I think some need space and time to process by themselves. Others need you to process it with them. So I think we found that with our children. Some would like a bit more hands-on with us, and others we needed to talk to them at another stage. And I used the example in Liverpool about our own son, who was struggling big time in his life. And but at the same time, I was struggling big time in church, and he noticed that, and he was prepared to talk, but he was certainly asking the questions, "How about you yourself?" So we come to a place where he had grown up and become he is still our son. He was my son, but he was also someone he wanted to relate to me as a brother, as someone who was in the faith with him. And I think there's a place for that, and to recognize that our kids change and that they become people in their own right in God. And you don't do that too soon, but you don't want to leave that too late either. So I think we need the help of God and wisdom of God to do that. So I think that's a whole thing. And it might, I'm not sure if I'm clear with saying this, but I think it's as parents, by prayer, but also by looking at them, you know what they need almost, and you have to be careful how you then do this. Because what you don't want to do is they then become dependent on you, and that they become dependent on your faith. What you want to see is they've got a faith of their own. We did foundation classes with them in our home, but we did it on baptism and everything, but we never asked them about baptism. Why not? Because we didn't want to force them into it. We needed to know for ourselves that their choice was a genuine one and not one that was ours. So I think it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think we help them at home, just talking to them and taking them seriously. But also, we were fortunate having a church in that time when our kids were teenagers, having a wonderful youth group. It was not the teaching was always so good, but they had really good friendship. They had fun. They were very creative, and they were still looking in those times. What can we give them to feed? And sometimes it was just a little bit, but they prayed together, and I think that is also a very, very helpful. And I think for this time, with the COVID for teenagers, it's not easy.
No.
And just keeping in contact with them and keeping, try to find creative things. I've seen that they do on Zoom kind of creative things, but we have to keep praying for the teenagers and youth, actually, because it's not always easy.
No, it's not an easy.
We found that here with the students, it's not easy.
No.
But we have to find creative ways and pray for them as well.
I think you referenced the time that your son acted as a brother to you and really helped. I know you did. Can you describe that scene to us again? Because for those who weren't there in Liverpool, that was a really beautiful moment where you just described where you were in your life and ministry, where he was, and how you helped one another.
Yeah. I think the moment came where you sometimes know it isn't going well with your kid, You see, he's not himself. He was not. He was not in a good setting, and we prayed about it, but we felt, what should we do? Shall I take him out? Or felt one afternoon he was home, I was home. At that moment, we still had a dog called Humble. He wasn't that humble, but his name was Humble, and a very small dog. And we took him out. I said to Bram, "Shall we go for a walk?" And so we went for a walk. And I, at that time, struggled with church, with things that were happening in the church. I was very unhappy. I'm very, very unhappy. I've not been so like that before. So as I walked, I said to him, Bram, is there anything you'd like to say? Is there anything I can do for you? You know, doesn't feel you're happy. Mum and I talked about it, prayed about it. You know, what's up? So he looked at me and he said, well, I'll tell you what's up if you tell me what's up. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're not a happy man. And I've never seen you like this. And what's happening? And I haven't heard you say anything about this, but I can see you're not happy, Dad. And I could still cry about it. We sat down on the bench, and we had this dog in front of us sniffing around, and I cried. I told the story of how I felt, and I cried in his arms. He took me in his arms, and I could cry, and so I had this for a while. So I finally, with wiping all the snot off my face and everything else, I looked a bit stupid at the dog. And so I said to him, what about you? And then he was very honest and he shared his heart. And I realized at the time that he had changed, but also he had become someone who could help me rather than I trying to help him. And it changed our relationship, but it also changed the way we looked at one another.
Yeah.
And since that time, he felt more open and honest about his feelings and thoughts. I think it was like a forming moment. And I think that moment, we've had a couple of those moments with one another, but also with the girls at times, those, I would say, golden moments, those moments you cannot make, but they are there. Mm. And to then take time and use them. And I think that was a moment in God. So I think from a son, he became much more than a son. And I think in precious time.
It was very special, wasn't it?
Special.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, the relationship between fathers and sons is notoriously complicated, but equally it's incredibly special. And as sons, we want nothing more than to have a father have that kind of intimate relationship with us. Any advice for fathers on how to cultivate a healthy relationship with sons?
No, I think I'm not an easy. In the beginning, before I met Renee, I thought I was an extrovert. But I think probably on my feelings, I've been an introvert. The way that Renee shows her feelings and emotions to God and really pours her heart out, and the way that she is with our kids, I'm not that kind of a person, and I have to think hard about that. But I think what I do is I come prepared when I meet my kids, in the sense of I have some questions, I have some things that I can share with them and ask them. I've not been in that position that I had a father who would ask me a question. I've never had my dad ask me any question, ever. Never been in that kind of... He probably never learned it himself, but he's never done it. I thought I don't want to become that kind of a dad. So I try to ask questions that are relevant, not like cliche and not too much similar, to maybe hopefully open up stuff. But I do ask hard questions that has to do with the heart, with response. And that I find at times have opened up. I don't want my son to think about me to being too serious, so we have, and our kids and our daughters, we have lots of fun times. But at the same time, yeah, I'd love to take him out or the girls out and ask other questions. But Renee's been like that more. So she's probably better better at answering this one.
It's different now because they're all married now.
Yeah.
I mean, in the
But I think that answer there is brilliant. I think you highlight the importance of asking questions of someone, because when someone asks you a question, you instantly feel valued because they want to know your opinion on things, which is a huge life lesson. So thank you for that. Well, our time together is almost at an end, but it's been so rich and there's been so many helpful, inspiring things you've said. Is there anything else you just really want to impart to encourage parents, encourage church planters, or any just reflections on how you see the church in general at a time like this?
Yeah, I think it's very special for families now. It's also challenging, I think, what I hear. But I think just keeping the joy and just be creative in the house, just be open to share. I think also, to not to give not so much pressure on children, because, just keep loving them. I mean, sometimes it's so much pressure they have to do, or they have to, but just help them to enjoy and just, like having peace for them. Huh?
Yeah.